Welcome to Liner Notes. My name is David Bixler. In a world that is increasingly anchored by AI and social media, pianist and composer Emilio Solla champions the human connection on his new recording, Handmade, with his nonet, La Inestable de Brooklyn. Swimming in his imagination are jazz, tango, classical, and other Argentinian folkloric music, which all cohesively coexist in this exciting musical offering. Emilio, good afternoon, good to see you, and congratulations on your new record, Handmade, which comes out March 12th.
Actually, it's March 13. March 12th is when we play. We presented at DC's that night here in New York.
Oh, phenomenal.
But the release day is the following day, which
Okay.
is Friday, March 13.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And this is with your nonet, La Inestable de Brooklyn.
That is correct.
A nonet that you formed in 2010, which is a great lineup. Really enjoyed the record. But Alejandro Aviles on woodwinds and Tim Armacost, Dave Smith on trumpet and flugelhorn, Mike Fahy trombone, the rhythm section yourself on piano, Edward Perez on the bass, and phenomenal Rogerio Baccato on percussion. But the thing I think that really stands out for me in this is the instrumentation. It's a nonet, and I just mentioned seven, but Sarah Caswell on violin and Rodolfo Zanetti on bandoneon. And
That's very well.
yeah, man, that because I think there's like so much in New York. There's so much great like big band, and like nonet's a very popular, vibe. And there's so many great cats. I've heard so much great music that sometimes it almost sounds monochromatic. But with the addition, like these two additional instruments, to me, man, it was like super outstanding. Just the orchestrational, like possibilities that you have at your disposal here, and like you've been doing it for over 15 years, so I'm sure you've like really grown in like how you meld these sounds together. But maybe talk a little bit about how you put this to, you're from Argentina, so I assume that you grew up with tango around you and heard these sounds, and then became a jazz musician at the same time, and this is what we do, like input, output. So maybe tell a little bit about your process.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's exactly. I mean, I think you define it yourself very well. You sound like me when I talk about it. It was like I grew up in Argentina, so tango is my thing. Not only tango, but also the folk music of Argentina, which is very different. Tango is the music of Buenos Aires, specifically of the port, and Buenos Aires and Montevideo, actually the capital of Uruguay. The both cities were responsible for the birth and development of tango music. So that's a very port music, with all that means, in terms of influences, and it's very interesting, similarities with the birth and evolution of jazz music, New Orleans, and all the ports, with all the information that they receive, especially at a moment in history at the turn of 19th century to 20th century, where that was all about immigration and people coming and going, and the same happening here in the United States, but with us it was like it gave birth to that funny, very unique, very special music that we call tango music. And as you mentioned, the bandoneon is the quintessential instrument, for that music. The moment when you hear an accordion and it puts you in Paris, and or you hear a certain way of playing guitar and you're in the south of Spain, then you hear the bandoneon, and there's no other place where you can be, imaginary, be sent or feel that you're really in Buenos Aires. It's the music, is the sound of that city. So obviously I grew up musically. I grew up studying classical music, but very much influenced by these sounds, especially Astor Piazzolla, as you can imagine, which was the guy that broke the rules, the same. And funny enough, also at the similar time, in a way where bebop was happening in the States, Piazzolla came and kicked the table and threw away everything we knew and everything the guys knew about tango, and said, this is no more dancing music. Now it's going to be much more complex. We're going to throw lots of harmonies, lots of arranging into it. And my generation of people, that was our guy. We were not interested in the older tango with four chords and talking about the woman that left the man, and 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 the crisis. And, it was like something that was totally outdated for me and for my generation. But Piazzolla, we did like Piazzolla was the guy, because our ears were already in 20th century music, were into jazz music, so that was the guy to follow. And also, I mentioned the folk music from Argentina because it's a totally different animal. It's like more 6/8 meets 3/4, you know, one leg in each rhythm, so to speak. And those are the kind of things that happen also. It's more music from especially from I would say, from the northwest of the country. So it goes up into, Peru and Venezuela and Colombia. And many of the dances and many of the rhythms have different names, but they are kind of very similar. And they have more like of an Afro influence sometimes. And they're totally different elements. That's where we have also the bandoneon, not so much, but the violin is very present in those sounds, and the percussion, some kind of percussion that we use, the flute. So that obviously is the elements and the ingredients with which I'm cooking. I've been cooking this music, as you well point out. And the other thing that I should say is that really this knowledge started at the end of 20th century, 1999. I put this together in Barcelona, and in 2001, I made a record for Fresh Sound that unfortunately did not have a lot of visibility, but it's a record I love. It. I think it's one of the best things I've done. It's called Suite Piazzoliana. It's a full suite in homage to Astor Piazzolla. And and that album had, Omer Avital on bass, Jorge Rossi on drums, Chris Cheek was playing saxophone, and a lot of cats from New York and some people from Barcelona when I was living there. And it's a great album, I think. It's very forward looking in terms of new tango, and it's sweet piazzoliana, so it's obviously an homage to Astor, but there's a lot of modern and other stuff there. And the instrumentation is very similar. I only have a cello instead of one of the horns. I think I don't have trombone. Yeah, I don't have trombone on that one, and I have a cello, but it's very similar. So I started really working on that concept of mixing the strings and the bandoneon with the horns and the rhythm section back in 2000. So yeah, I've been into it, looking how to blend the bandoneon, for example, as one more reed, because it's a reed instrument at the end of the day. Use it as a horn, or sometimes send him to do tango work. So I feel like I have some subunits in the note that are very interesting to me. I can be a pure traditional tango quartet of double bass, piano, bandoneon, and violin, not even drums. That's how that music was played and is still being played. I was at the Sing Bar for more than 3 years, playing every Sunday with exactly a quartet like that, and people would come to dance. That's the dance tradition of tango music. So I can be that. Suddenly, I can throw the drums and the bass and the piano and become a jazz trio, and then I can bring in the horns and go into a totally different thing, more related to what you were saying. The big band sound, or the large ensemble sound, more New Yorky in a way. So it's for me, it's like uh, a a kid in a toy store. It's like I can do this and now I can do that. So I evoke different sonorities, and the game is to see how they can all live together and make something that hopefully does not sound like a pastiche, but of some kind of new music that is being realized by a guy that has this information and this background, but at the same time has been in New York for 20 years and is a jazz lover and a jazz musician, so to speak. I don't play bebop; it's not my thing, but I think I fall into that category. Since we use improvisation and those harmonies and everything. But yeah, I'm not very curious about or interested in trying to find a definition. But again, just to summarize, I think you you said it very well.
Mhm.
That's where it comes. The whole thing comes
I
from.
think it's very effective on the record, and no, I don't think it sounds like it's put together at all. I mean, I think it's very effective in, like, the coming together and splitting apart. I found that very interesting, kinda, like, following the trail of, like, what instrument grouping was gonna be, how the baton was handed off, I guess you would. And I think when I talk, the record is, maybe a central part of it is the Suite de los Abrazos. And, I wanna talk about the order of that and how it relates. I think it's just novel, and, the order of how it's presented. But for me, I loved the 3rd track on the recording, Milonga Mutante. which is actually the first part of the suite, right? Yeah, I just thought that was, just super cool, like, really speaks of what you're talking about how you the different ways you can put these instruments together in an effective way. Maybe talk about well, a couple of things, the pandemic raises its ugly head again, and, like, you wrote this, like, this suite for hugging, or, and maybe the missing of them during that time, and, was this music composed during the pandemic, or were you reflecting on it afterwards?
I think a little bit of both. Sometimes what happens to me as a composer is like I don't sometimes I can just sketch an idea, a few bars of something that I have in mind, and then it stays there in a piece of paper for many years, and then suddenly I go back to it intuitively or on purpose, or I have like a big archive of things, all handwritten things, and then when I'm in to composing mode, then I go and fetch because some of those ideas, as you probably know, as a composer as well, it's like some things appear and go away, and some things start to come back in different formats, but you realize, oh, this is related to that thing that I was thinking of like 6 months ago. Some ideas for some reason come more, we know, with more. They want to be heard. They want to be in your music studying the piano and be worked on. So they call for your attention, in some magical way that we don't know how that happens, right? Like, so I think that I took, for example, the Milonga Mutante that you mentioned. I had that idea for a long time about doing a crazy Milonga with some kind of 12 tone pro pira pira puri bura pirurira, tira dura, like, those intervals and they're, moved around. So it's kind of the same cell repeated 3 times and it covers the 12 tone and crazy, but at the same time harmonizing in D minor, like very, that idea was sitting there for a long time. The second movement, which is the heartfelt movement, the lost, I think that one came right into the pandemic because originally I recorded it, and there's an interesting video I can send you that I did it in the pandemic, and I have a video of the guys performing just the first part of it only. Um, with Alex Norris on trumpet and Terry Goss on saxophones and Alejandro Avilés, and some of the cats are there. And they are all using masks. So in the video, of course, when they recorded well. But if you see the video, it's all, everybody at their own home, as we used to work at that time. And they're using the masks as they play. And the title was called Masked originally. So, I took the idea from there for the second movement. And then the third movement was also this idea of the D pedal, the D low pedal, and like a candombe on top of it. That idea that seems like minor and major at the same time. That was sitting there also for some time. And for some reason, the three things made sense to connect. And I found like similarities and things in the motifs that were, like thematically similar. I said, oh, look at this, then I have a permission to relate this to that. The first movement and the third movement relate a lot in terms of the intervals that I'm using. So, then as you know, it's all work. It's the architect there. You know, you have an idea, but then the rest, unfortunately, is 9 to 5. With the hammer and the thing, and trying the idea to show you who she is. And try her to let her develop in a way. In a natural way. Oh, this connects to that. Oh, okay. And you start seeing things, but it's many, many, many hours for me at least.
Yeah, you kinda touched on this, but one of the things in the notes, you talk about the second movement, the melody came to visit you. I like that. Maybe I don't know if you wanna elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, because I think those things, and sometimes I provoke a little bit my students. So when a couple of times I gave a master class and I'm talking about something like that, and I say, and this is so beautiful, this is such a beautiful piece of music. And people are so like, wow. First reaction of many people is like, man, you're so full of yourself. You're talking about something that you wrote as being very beautiful. But then I know that they're thinking like that. I said, and you might be thinking of this, but mind you that I did not write this. That's the trick. That's why you can talk about your music, you know, inverted commas, as something that is beautiful or something that is this or that. Because if you're honest with yourself, it's the same for improvisation, I think. It's like, oh, what just happened? These kind of things, that melody that is there, in the loss, the melody that is presented by the piano, at the first time, and then by the bandoneon, so it's so emotional for me. That's so beautiful, that music. It just came out in the piano, like the whole thing there took me like half hour to write. And I was almost with tear in my eyes writing the music down, like saying, wow, how lucky I am right now that this is coming here, like why is this happening with this da da dee da dee da dee da dee da 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 dee da da dee da. Man, what a beautiful, what a an emotional thing, and I'm here witnessing this, and I'm the lucky guy that gets to write it. But you're if you think that you're responsible for that, and actually it's the opposite of being pedantic. It's accepting the humble thing where you're just you're lucky enough, and of course you studied harmony and you study music, so you can put that into notes, but you're just a lucky medium that are able to receive that thing and put it in a piece of paper and then in a recording, and get people to listen to it. But we are just, when those things happen, I feel we are just part of the audience. It's like, oh, look at this. So you learn, that's a very important point that I always make with my students, and I've been trying to work on for many years. It's like detach yourself from the music that you're writing, and understand that your responsibility is very limited. That you're really a servant of the music, you're a servant of the idea, and your role is to give that idea all the harmonic possibilities, counterpoint possibilities, orchestration possibilities, put the menu in front of her so that she can pick. And I say she, and how this doesn't sound chauvinist, is because in Spanish it's la música, it has it has a, as like the, like nouns are male or female. So for me, it's la música. So I don't want to call it it, which I think is degrading for the music. It's such an important thing. So I call it she. But the idea is she's here to be herself. And that takes me to a very important, it would be a very long point, but about how much we wrongly push the musical idea to be one thing or the other, depending on who we are, on our own prejudices, on our own fears, and the more you act on the music, the less the music will tell something about yourself or about the world or about something that is outside of you. It will be more about yourself and less about more profound things that we don't know exactly where they come from, who they are, and then you're limiting your possibility to connect with the other human beings. I think that's my point of view. I may be wrong, but I try to work a lot like that. Even if it takes much longer, I try not to impose me on the music, but to let the music go. And yeah, that music that visited me, it's like it's impossible to believe that such a mediocre human being as myself, with all my defects and everything, will be able to create such a piece of beauty as that melody is. It's something that it has to be bigger than me. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, it's an interesting point. I think that I always try to discuss with my students and with colleagues, also as well.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. Another thing I wanted to touch on in your text, and you're writing about handmade, you say it's a tribute to craft. And, I kinda like that you equate making music with, the art of handmade. And, I kinda like that you equate making music with, the art of handmade. And, I kinda like that you equate making music with, the art of handmade. And, I kinda like that you equate making music with, the art of handmade. And, I kinda like that you equate making music with, the art of handmade. And, I kinda like that you equate making music with, the art of handmade. And, I kinda like that you equate making music with, the art of handmade. And, I kinda like that you equate making music with, the art of handmade. And, I kinda like that you equate making music with, the art of handmade. And, I kinda like that you equate making music with, the art of handmade. And, I kinda like that you equate making music with, the art of handmade. And, I kinda like that you equate making music with, the art of handmade. And, I kinda like that you equate making music with, the art of handmade. And, I kinda like that you equate making music with, the art of handmade. And, I kinda like that you equate making music with, the art of handmade. And, I kin being a farmer, like growing something, or being a shoemaker or a seamstress or something, like, this is what we do. It's not like, kind of on a pedestal. But the thing that I really wanted to touch on is you write, as artificial intelligence makes us more naturally silly. I choose to keep vouching for the handmade. Amen to that. But what I want to touch on is, like in discussions I've had, and just thoughts myself, artificial intelligence, I think, is has the potential to dumb down society. You don't have to write an email anymore. It will craft an email for you. It will write a paper. It can write, pretty good music. But tell me about more naturally silly. That struck me.
That I was just trying to play with the words. Actually, I think originally I said, naturally stupid, and then, my agent, my manager, Eric Overstein,
Yeah.
which by the way says hello.
Yeah, he's the one that told me about it. I
Uh,
saw him at the Congress, a couple weeks ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and he said, "Hey, say hello to David," and everything. So Eric, he's very, like, laid back guy and very, polite. So, Emilio, maybe naturally stupid is like, I said, okay, naturally silly, okay. But my idea was like, to play against the artificial intelligence, naturally stupid, which is a very dangerous relation that I find is pointing us to. And I, again, with my students, with the younger generation, I forbid them to use any AI. I forbid them to use their laptops or their electronic devices in class. You handwrite everything. You take notes from the blackboard. You write the music with a pencil and a piece of paper. You go back to the craft, guys. This is craft. You're not gonna paint a landscape with a computer, right? Like, where's the there's something about the making, about the magic of the whole thing of acting on the piece of art physically, that I think, and it takes also, to the artificial intelligence, like as you mentioned, we're becoming more stupid, man. Everything is cooked. All you have to do is put it in the microwave and the food is ready. No, let me go cut the onions, you know? Let me go grab the book, go through the pages, all the physical things that happen when we create. We are getting to the world of idiots, man. Like, we're so far away from hanging, that's why the hanging suite, the physical contact, the thing about, touching, the use of the hands, handmade, this is all, it all, for me, it makes sense. It goes to the same thing, that I wanted to say, or maybe I was thinking a lot into that. That's why the handmade idea came over.
Okay. You spoke of studying classical music in your youth. How did you get into jazz?
It's a good question. My father used to play double bass a little bit, and I had a brother that was playing drums, and there was a lot of jazz music at home. Duke Ellington, I remember. And I was, drawn to that music since I was a kid, but never paid much attention until I spent a few years at the classical conservatory. I entered when I was 8. I started, and by 12, I have two older brothers that they were bringing all the music from first Beatles, of course, but then Genesis, yes, uh, and all the progressive rock. And I was a kid, but I was listening to the music. I said, oh, and then Chick Corea, with the Return to Forever band and all that. And one day I heard Bill Evans and I heard Oscar Peterson say, "Wait a minute, whoa, 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 whoa. What am I playing at the piano?" I was just like, "Hello, oh, I want to play that thing." Like the chords. I think the harmony. The way where the guys were inventing music in real time. Like, what? How do you do that? So I think that triggered my curiosity, and then it was like no return. I became a bad boy, and they kicked me out of the conservatory because I was always improvising and everything, and didn't want to
Really?
read more and more Beethovens and everything. Yeah, I had an argument with some woman there. I went back many years later just to complete my classical studies, because then I realized that I was missing a lot of techniques and a lot of things. So I went back and I finished my conservatory, but my mind and my ideas were already in a different direction. But I went back to do Bach, which is, I still to the day, that's my morning medicine when I can. Like I see the preludes and fugues, because there's nothing like that for the piano, and I think that all the jazz pianists that we like and that we admire, they all, you know, they have all done their homework very seriously.
Sure. Was there an elder statesman in Buenos Aires that you could get the information from, or someone you could hang out with or study formally with?
Yeah, yeah. I started around 16 or 17. I started taking lessons with a couple of guys there. There was some nice jazz scene in Buenos Aires, and some good cuts. Yeah, some guys that could really play. And then I started, when I was 21 or so, I started just playing professionally and having my bands, and they were always very Argentinian oriented in the music, but the harmony and everything we were doing was a lot of chord symbols and extensions, and like upper tensions and whatnot, right? Like we had that sound in our heads already.
Yeah. I hear, like, fair amount of Stravinsky, might be correct, might not be correct, and, Gil Evans also within, like, the orchestration, which, I mean, he was probably checking that out too, so that could be Gil Evans could be Stravinsky once removed, possibly, I don't know. Let's jump on the band. When you, has this configuration of musicians worked together or recorded together before, or was this the first time?
Well, we had an album, but there were many different members in the band. A couple of them are still there, I think. But actually, lots of changes now that I think of it. But I had the same configuration. As you mentioned, we started in 2010, and then in 2015 we produced the first album, which is called Second Half, with which I'm pretty happy as well. And yeah, so that was a nice project. We grew all those years. We put out that album, and then I stopped that a little bit and put my efforts into creating a big band, which I did in 2019, the Tango Jazz Orchestra. And 2020 I released my big band album. But then I decided that a big band is a pain in the neck to work with, and too many people, and you never get gigs, you never can go out of New York, etc., etc. I said, let's go back to the nine piece, to a smaller ensemble, and then I put my energy back into this band again.
Okay. Are you able to I mean, 9 hotel rooms, 9 flights is still a formidable amount of money. Are you able to get the band out?
No, but no, but yes,
Yeah.
we went out a couple of times, and now, fortunately, all my kudos to and thankful to Chamber Music America, we got the consortium application grant, and so we're going to California in 2027 in April. Um, so we have already 3 gigs lined up. Very exciting because without this grant they give money to the bookers, to the venues, so the venues can book you. And I have my good friend there, Redwood Jazz Alliance, Michael Eldridge, who has been vouching for this, and they presented the project together with 222 in Hillsburg. And it looks like we might probably be doing SF Jazz as part of that tour. So we already have 3, probably 1 or 2 more would be able to line up. So yes, we're traveling out. So that's great. That's great. But for me, it's also, as a composer, I make these albums and I create this music because it's where I can express myself better as a writer, than in a smaller ensemble. So I like to do them, and also this album was also possible through a grant by Chamber Music America, the New Jazz Works grant that I got in 2024. And that is how I could make it happen, also have the money to pay the guys and record and develop the music and sit at home to compose, for hours and hours. So, I like to do that, regardless of how many possibilities we have to present it live, so, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, I hope more of those come by. The music is deserving to be heard. I appreciate that. Before I let you go, I just wanted to touch on I first listened to this in the car, and I got to the end of it, and then all of a sudden and I when I have a guest on with new music, I listen to it before I read anything about it, okay? And so I get my phone stops, and I look down, I'm driving, but I'm being safe, right? And then I see that we're going back to the suite at the end, that's how it's placed in the recording, and it looks like it and then it's in the order that the suite's presented it on SoundCloud. I think that's what might be happening there. And so anyhow
Oh,
yeah, so I wanna get back to, like, the book where you can read it, chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, sequentially, or you can jump around. And then I don't really get how that works and maybe how you translated that to music. That's the last thing I wanted to ask you, man.
Yeah. I had to check that SoundCloud thing because my aim was to put them in order, and the order actually is as you well point out, the suite de los abrazos, the hanging suite, is scattered in the album. The three movements, and movement. The opener of the album is movement 3, so I start by the last movement. The third track of the album is movement 1, and the fifth track of the album is movement 2.
Right.
But if you heard it and you heard it at the end, that might be the SoundCloud is wrong. But anyway, that's definitely happened in the album, and the comparison that I'm doing there, the album is with one of the greatest Latin American writers of all time, Julio Cortázar, a very important Argentinian writer that created a novel that's been translated into English and tons of languages. A fantastic book that I recommend you. It's called Hopscotch.
Oh, yes.
So, and the idea of the book in Argentina is, in Espanol, is rayuela. And the idea in Rayuela is that you can read it, from the beginning to the end, like chapter 1, 2, 3, papa. But then he also says, or you can read it like this. And then he gives you a full list of how to read the chapters when he's doing kind of flashbacks all the time, and he takes you to a second part of the book where he's in Argentina. The first part he's in Paris, so you go back and forth, like how you do in the game. So I thought, because I wanted to start with that third movement, because the first movement is very dense, like as is the one you like, the Milonga Mutante. But I don't want to be like super jazz oriented, like a musician for musicians. I hate that label and that thing, where, we're all the jazz nerds and we work for each other. Oh, look at this chord, look at how complex I was. And this first movement is very complex. And I didn't want to scare the normal listeners, away. If they start with the Milonga Mutante, they're gonna say, what the heck is going on? First thing they hear is a 12-tone melody. And that's not me, that's not what I do. So I said the third movement is much more appealing. But how do I start a thing with the third movement? Okay, let's use that as an excuse and pretend that I'm a clever guy and I'm scattering this. But the reason is purely commercial in one way. It's like, I need to start with this. Oh shit, what do I do now? Okay, but this is fun. Let's put 3, let's put 1, and then let's put 2, and so I put them in a kind of an album order that I thought was fun. And then that gave me the opportunity to talk about that kind of thing, which I also like. And if people wants to hear the suite in a row, they can go track 3, 1, 5, and then you hear the suite, which makes sense. Makes a lot of sense to hear it as one piece. This, as you will see if you do that.
So if you go, like, when you go to California, will you play the suite in order?
Yes, when I played live, I played in order because the people has already paid the ticket.
Yeah.
I have them there. I'm not scared they will go. They will listen to the first movement and say, what the is this? But then the second movement is so embraced. So,
Yeah.
I get them there. And the third one, we kill them, with that candombe and everything. So I know that the going up of the suite with that happy kind of last part in F major, with the joropo and everything. Yeah. There's some hope. There's some light at the end of the tunnel, So I know that I can keep them, with me on the first movement and then give them the other two. So definitely I'll do that live.
Nice, man. Well, Emilio, I thank you for your time. Good to see you. Good to talk to you. And thank you for the music. The record is handmade, and you'll be at Dizzy's on Thursday, March 12th. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Good memory.
That is correct.
Okay, at least I remembered that, man. All right. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I'll talk to you soon. Hope you can make it, of course, in March.
Liner Notes is grateful for the support of Van Doren Reeds and Mouthpieces. Be sure and check out the Van Doren Advisory Studio in New York City for all your sound sculpting needs. Liner Notes is grateful for the support of Arlen's Good Beer in Bowling Green, Ohio.
Engineered by Marco Mendoza. Visit his website at engineeredbymarco.com.
The theme music is Hide, Seek, Find from my record Beatitude, out on Tiger Turn. Produced by David Bixler. Be sure and subscribe to Liner Notes wherever you find your podcasts. If you like what you hear, I ask that you consider supporting Liner Notes financially. You can do this by going to the Liner Notes tab at davidbixler.com. Thank you for your consideration.